What's good, YouTube? Steel here, and if you clicked on this video, more likely than not, you're on your rank climb, trying to make the most of the final day of the season. Whether you've been struggling, have plateaued, or just in search for something new to try, this video will include the decks that have allowed me to reach my current peak of 2070 and hopefully climbing as I make one final push for top 100 to end the season. But before we begin, I would like to ask y'all to please consider subscribing if you haven't done so already, as we're so close to 500, and trust me, we're going to go all out with the content this coming season, so I promise you, you won't regret it. Regardless, thanks for watching, and let's get right into it. Full transparency, the title might say top 5 decks, but it's more like top 5 strategies that represent the umbrella of decks that I will be recommending. Nonetheless, as usual, there will be chapters down below, so you could feel free to jump around to specific lists or strategies based on like what you're looking for or what you're like envisioning. Maybe you have like a certain deck in mind, you're trying to see what list best works for that. Feel free to jump around. As always, I'm just thankful that you're watching, but let's begin with my number one suggestion. Oricorio in any capacity is one of the best cards to use in ranked right now, as it's basically the only card that could win you a game frame like 0. Like as soon as your cards flip, if the deck has no answer to you, they might, as like usually, unless they're like, you might find that petty guy or petty girl, petty person that just sits there and like disconnects and makes you wait the whole turn, or plays through it until both of y'all got nothing in deck and you have to like fight through it. That will happen, but regardless, it's still a win, right? A win's a win. But the amount of times that you'll just flip your Oricorio and they'll just scoop is more than 0, which is something that we'll take, right? The name of the game in ranked is definitely a quantity-based strategy, not so much like you just want to win games and you want to win them as fast as possible, and there's nothing faster than an auto concede. As to which Oricorio version I recommend, personally, if you've never played like an Oricorio strategy or you just want to get into it or try something simple, I have to recommend the Magnezone Oricorio. It's probably the most like I guess streamlined version of Oricorio, as it's pretty straightforward. You just start Oricorio, have it stand there as much as possible, whether it's against an EX deck or not. It just stands there. It takes time. It's 70 HP. Is actually more respectable than you would think, especially once you take out the fact that EXs can't hit you. And eventually you build up a Magnezone, and it's usually how you finish games. But good thing to know, like obviously you have auto wins against Charizards that aren't ready for you. You auto win Dark Giratinas that aren't playing the Koala. But you also win, you have a very, very strong matchup against Meowscarada Decidueye, because Decidueye cannot hit your bird, and Meowscarada, not only can it not one-shot Oricorio, it struggles to take down Magnezone. So both your lines hard wall either one of their lines, and that's not to mention if you Mars them and completely like basically this deck has a great matchup against 3 of the most popular decks in the format, which is clearly Decidueye, Darkrai Giratina, and Charizard. You'll find Charizard everywhere. Charizard's a fan favorite, whether it's very good or very consistent. It's even on this list, to be honest. But if you're looking for a consistent and very effective deck, this is definitely a way to go. Clearly, keep in mind that you do have a tough matchup against anything that's fighting, whether it's Lucario, whether it's Garchomp, regardless. If there's weakness to it, or they just have like non-EX attackers, you will struggle, or you might struggle, but the majority of the format is not that, which is what you have to keep in mind. The second Oricorio strategy that I could recommend, and I personally am a bigger fan of this one, as it's far more like it's a lot less linear, so maybe like the learning curve or like the plays or what to do in certain matchups gets a little tougher. However, the versatility in how you win games, or the possibility to attack with Greninja, because the last list obviously you run mono electric because lightning, because that's all you have, and this one you do play dual energies, which sometimes comes to bite you. But the fact that you have a Rida makes it where like Darkrai Giratina is basically locked out of having a way to beat you. Whether they try to sit behind a rocky helmet and you start poking at them with Greninja, or building up a Giratina that wins you the game, like in the late game, you actually have that heavy hitter. Like there's so many lines of play to how to win with this deck that it's personally, as you saw earlier in the video, like that 4-game win streak that I had was with this exact list. So it's something that I truly recommend, and I feel like the ceiling is super high. Granted, there's games where like, oh, if you don't see the Greninja, you might lose, or there's certain matchups where Giratina is actually a bait, and what I mean by bait is like, oh, this is my finisher, so you put it down and start building it up, and you lose because of it. Like against Garchomp, you never want to drop Giratina. Against Tapu Lele, very rarely do you want to do it unless it's like a final ditch attempt, or it's like you have no other choice. Against Tapu Lele mirrors where Greninja's on the other side and they could just like snipe it and bring it out. We will look at all those lists, because those are other lists that I will recommend. It's where you really don't want to put down Giratina, and you learn that through practice, honestly. But honestly, a very effective deck. If you see like the line, Oricorio continues to auto win the matchups it's supposed to auto win. Greninja makes it where you auto win certain matchups that you didn't necessarily were able to win with just the other list. You have like a better fight against like fighting decks, depending on what your hand is. You're not as out like all in on a plan. You still have a pretty decent Meowscarada matchup, as Greninja is just as hard for them to take down as Magnezone. especially with Shaman healing, especially with Irida to heal. Like, it's a very strong deck. I highly recommend it. If you want to see gameplay on this deck, I actually have a video on it. I'll put it down in the description or a title card somewhere. So if you want to see more into this list, I do have a video on it. I'm very high on this list. Honestly, if I could go back, again, I repeat it, if I could go back to the 10K, this is probably the list exactly card for card that I would use in that. And that Oricorio list bleeds into my next strategy or umbrella, which is Giratina. Giratina is very strong, if not the best like standalone Pokemon in this meta. So many decks are revolved around it. So many decks are meant to like counter it. It's like, it's on everybody's mind. You see Psychic Energy, you already know it's coming. And although if you are in the mentality of I want to play Giratina, I had to segue from this list, from using this list. But this is not the list that I would mainly recommend if your goal is to win with Giratina. For that, my number one choice would be the Tapu Lele Greninja variant. So basically, you swap out Oricorio for Tapu Lele. This makes your Giratina far more consistent in terms of like being the main attacker. Also, in the Oricorio matchup, this list should be have the advantage. Granted, if you have enough healing, or if you, again, if I'm playing the Oricorio list against this, I don't drop Giratina on the board. Like, that puts you already behind technically because you don't have the same power output that they're presenting. But you try to outpace their Tapu Lele damage with your Oricorio damage, and then you hope the Iridas and the healing that we definitely have, like we have Shaman and we have Irida, we try to out heal whatever Tapu Lele and Greninja are dealing with. Granted, if they see their Greninja and Tapu Lele, you lost, which is... So back to this list, I truly believe that if you're focusing on Giratina, this is the best way to use it consistently. You have Psychic, this is just mono Psychic Energy. You do have the option to use Water and Psychic. However, that's better in like a tournament aspect if you're like predicting many mirrors or many Solgaleos, or you could see what you're going against, then you could consider it. However, I personally would just play mono Psychic. Very strong deck. Tapu Lele is a strong card on its own. Like, every card in this deck wins games on its own, similar to the Oricorio list. Just Oricorio wins against non-EXs. Tapu Lele has a very good matchup against almost everything that's trying to build up energy. You do struggle, I guess, against fighting decks as in the sense that they don't really put too much energy. So like, again, and if you're using this deck, if you're going against Garchomp, Giratina's a trap. You put down Giratina, you give them a win condition. Unless you see it really quickly and you want to do that race, by all means, try your best. But yeah, Giratina list, I would suggest this one. And then another one that's been popping up everywhere and has had like very success. Actually, I find it more successful in this one. It's just a little more, I guess, like risky. Like it's like high reward, high risk, high reward situation. Is Giratina Magnezone. You basically dump Greninja, you dump Oricorio, and you add Giratina and Tapu Lele instead. The concept is the same, except here you're definitely using all Psychic. The lightning energy is produced by the Magneton in the middle ground, with the Magneton's its own ability, and you have all the upsides that the Giratina list has. When you have the finisher that Magnezone, this again gives you a better matchup against Meowscarada, as they can't really deal with Magnezone unless they put Decidueye. But then Tapu Lele is like poking damage. You have the Mars, very strong deck. When I say high ceiling is because if you don't see the Magnezone and you're going against an Oricorio, it could get a little awkward. Not having Greninja also makes it where you're depending on Tapu Lele to do the damage. So you lose that aspect of being able to just like Greninja ping Cyrus out the opposing Greninja in the mirror. And that's like a really strong play that the last list I just showed has, that this list sacrifices. But you sacrifice it to have a better matchup against other decks. And technically, in a perfect world, you do have the higher ceiling, right? So another deck that I recommend, it did well for me. Again, out of everything that I've shown so far, I'd have to lean towards the Oricorio with Greninja version, just because it fits my playstyle more and it's more versatile. I feel like all these other lists, although they have like different win conditions, all of them are pretty streamlined. Your opponent could play around them if they have the right cards. But honestly, I don't think you could go wrong with any of these decks. They're very strong. Giratina is one of the best cards in the game. Oricorio has like a cheap win condition. And then obviously you're almost like looping, like you're rotating the same supporters between Magnezone, Greninja, and Tapu Lele. So you could see like how they're all different decks but have like the same mindset, where they like have like a main source of like win condition followed by some of the best supporting like cast in the game. Now we're heading towards territory that's no longer an umbrella, it's more like a specific strategy. As we see from Meowscarada Decidueye, this deck is one of the most played decks due to all the answers that it has to the meta. As you see, I definitely listed a whole bunch of decks that kind of answer this one. So this one starts falling under the category of like, you want a rotation in ranked. It's like something that I should have pinpointed probably at the beginning of the video. But when it comes to ranked, you don't want to just pick one deck and go all out. At least that's not my personal advice, because whether you go on tilt, whether you have a string of bad luck, whatever it is, you could really find yourself dropping in the ranks. it's always good to like every loss or two switch it around, switch not only for like to not get like I guess bored of what you're playing with, but also just to have different perspectives. One of the best ways to learn how to counter a deck is to use it yourself. You see what other people are doing to beat you, and you like adapt that to like how you take them down. At least that's one way I tend to learn. But yeah, Meowscarada Decidueye, it's one of those decks that when I'm going against it, it's so frustrating because I feel like they're just like way too lucky, if that makes sense. Like even whether I red card them, whatever it is, like I'll put them down to 3-card hand, and it's always like rare candy, the evolution they need, and like a cape to make sure that they heal or are healing. But it doesn't take away that this deck is a great counter to Darktina. And this deck just has great lines that if people don't respect it, like if it's super consistent is what I'm trying to get at. The Sprigatito with Call for Family, make sure that you see basically every line. If you avoid red card, if you avoid Mars, it's you're basically foam free to like deal so much damage and deal like Meowscarada is almost the equivalent of Oricorio in the sense that you out the EXs so easily, and Decidueye is one of like the best closers because whether they're trying to hide, you don't even play Cyrus or Sabrina in this list. Anything that's damaged is just as good as gone. The Rowlet that lets you deal 10 damage gets countered by Shaman. That's why Shaman's in so many of the lists that I showed prior. But if they're not on Shaman and the early game and they don't respect it, and even if they have Oricorio up front, you poke damage on something in the backline and you basically put a target on that thing's back. One thing that to note is that I do recommend the Dartrix variant. Mainly because not only is it the one that was doing better in tournaments, so it's like easy to say like, oh look, it's doing better in tournaments, so you might as well do that. But the reason definitely comes down to the whole red card situation where you don't want to like bank everything on seeing rare candy, especially since it also allows you to use both rare candies on the Meowscarada line and still be able to get to Decidueye. You never want to be like early game use rare candies to Meowscarada because that's what you saw, and then Decidueye is dead for the rest of the game. You want to have that option to be able to bring every line up to the stage 2. And of course, I'm also a big proponent of using the triple healing variant. When I go against decks like the Decidueye decks that aren't playing the triple healing, I could always feel like I close out a lot easier. Or like if they had that extra healing, I would have lost. So that's one of those things where I learned from practicing like against and with the deck that healing is very important. And that second form between the owl is also very important. The next set of decks actually comes to Stoke Charizard. Stoke Charizard has super high ceiling. If you see it early enough, there's very little to nothing your opponents can do. Granted, if you run into Oricorio, you do auto lose with this list specifically. So before, like when it comes to Charizard, there's two things you have to keep in mind. One, do you want to respect Oricorio? Or two, do you not care for Oricorio? Basically, what ends up happening if you choose one, you'd use a list like this with Incineroar, which the ceiling is much higher. The amount of damage you could deal and how fast you can win is much higher. In theory, right? I guess it's more consistent to win with like stronger plays. And I'll get into the second option. But if you're playing this list, it's with the mentality that I'm gonna grind ranked as fast, like as many games as I can. If I see the yellow bird, I'm aware that I lost. We go on to the next one. You have to have that mentality. Otherwise, you're gonna get bumped every time you see the bird. And honestly, that's why we give you a second option. The second option being Charizard with Turtonator, which that's why I said like kind of more like winning faster, because honestly, there's not many faster wins than like a turn like going first. You go Turtonator, Kiawe, so that you're guaranteeing a 90 damage swing the following turn. There's a lot of decks that fall to that, from Meowscarada, which you have a good matchup regardless of which variant you're using. Yeah, Meowscarada loses to that. Tapu Lele decks lose to that because you're like, yeah, they might hit you for 40. You knock out Tapu Lele and like, what are they gonna do? Even like Magnezone or Oricorio, like Oricorio is the main reason you're playing Turtonator, just to like one shot the bird. But like a lot of strategies, like let's say I'm on Arceus Carnivine, which we'll talk about later as well. If you just have it up there, it just gets knocked out. Like you just start knocking out my Pokemon. Like what do I do? Like so. If you use that strategy, if you're afraid of the bird or respect the bird, this is definitely the option to go with, because you have both the option to have an out to the Oricorio, and not to mention that it's very like, I guess if you think about it truly, like which one has the higher ceiling, this one might be the one with the higher ceiling, but at the same time, it's the more protective list. So I went into this trying to tell y'all the higher, like the list I would use is Incineroar Charizard because it's like more consistent or more strong. Granted, you have to be. I feel like the Incineroar version is more resilient to decks like Darkrai Giratina. However, if you play this list and you find the Charizard fast enough, Darkrai Giratina doesn't bother you either. So I guess take that as you will. Personally, my first choice wouldn't be Charizard, but let's say, like I mentioned, it's very important to have like a rotation and not get stuck on using just one deck. This is definitely a deck that's worth putting in your rotation, and you can't go wrong with it. yes, you'll break. Yes, you'll go against the bird and not find your Turtonator. Or if they're, that's the reason why I lean towards the Greninja version of Oricorio. Because if they are on Turtonator and for some reason don't find Kiawe, well, not for some reason, like by chance they don't also find the Kiawe, I have time to build up like a Greninja in the backline and have other answers. Not that if I'm just on Magnezone Oricorio, I'm just at the mercy of that Turtonator completely taking over the game. But honestly, a big fan of Charizard. I actually would put Charizard over Decidueye in decks that I would personally use myself. But that's just because I feel like I don't have the luck that other Decidueye players have. But nonetheless, Charizard, good option for last minute, just grinding, playing a whole bunch of games. You either see the win or you don't, and you go on to the next one. Now we're back to what I like to call an umbrella, as Rampardos is the umbrella in this case, as there's many different fighting variations, whether it's all fossils, whether it's Garchomp, whether it's Lucario, that are using Rampardos. And I feel like any version of Rampardos, I can't believe almost for Lycanroc and Rockruff. Rockruff was like one of the most like used decks at the early game. Granted, it definitely got like people figured out the strategy. Also, there's like if you go against Meowscarada, your Rockruff might not last long enough to... not Meowscarada, Carnivine. If you're going against Arceus Carnivine, they could punish your Rockruff very early. However, when it comes to Rampardos, Rampardos is able to close out any game, regardless of what deck you're pairing it with. The most popular one has to be Garchomp. Garchomp is a great answer to all the Giratina lists that I've listed prior, as well as having a good to decent matchup against the likes of... I was about to say Darkrai. No, it's terrible. You, like, get annihilated by Darkrai Giratina. At least statistically, in the tournament scene, it got like Garchomp decks got farmed by Darkrai Giratina. But that's not what you. If you're using this list, you're trying to counter Giratina lists like the Tapu Leles, the Oricorios, the Greninja list. Like you counter those lists. You counter Arceus. Like if they don't build an Arceus list, especially that's why we use the Dragon type Gibble, so you're not weak to like an early game Carnivine. You're able to beat up Arceus list against Charizard. It gets a little awkward, but it's very fast paced. And if you find the Rampardos fast enough, there's again it's similar to the Turtonator situation where it's very hard for you to close it out. I mean, for them to do anything and you just close it out with the Rampardos. Not to mention Garchomp is very strong, it being able to tag damage all over the place, and then you either Cyrus it out or keep on tagging until they're gone. You have a lot of win conditions. And again, against the Oricorio list, you try to like take advantage of everything that they're putting around the Oricorio. They're forced to just sit on Oricorio, and that's when you close it out with Cranidos one-shots the bird. Rampardos definitely gets rid of it. So, very high end. However, there's also another Rampardos list that I find a lot in masterball, which is the standard Lucario version of Rampardos, which got... although it sees a lot less play, it definitely saw an uptick in power thanks to Rare Candy, as you're able to skip right from Fossil to Rampardos and deal damage when like your opponent least expects it, or when they're like hoping like they can't like run away from like damage as easily as before. The main reason this deck exists though is if you're finding a lot of Magnezone Oricorio, that deck tends to be everywhere, especially if like you're basically trying to catch the anti-meta, if that makes sense. You have the Oricorios trying to deal with all the EX decks, and if you catch those decks in their route, again, you just win outright. And then you also have you could always backtrack on Rampardos. This deck also serves as like a counter to all the other EX decks like Giratina, Darkrai Giratina. With the Lucario, you're one-shotting everything on their side of the board. So like it has all the upsides that it used to have. Not to mention like being able to steal the Oricorio games. So maybe not as popular. Maybe I'm not as confident to tell you to use this deck. But since I've seen it, I felt like it was like I would be doing y'all dirty if I didn't present a deck that has obviously been working for a lot of people in Master Ball. Speaking of doing dirty or disservice, another one would be not adding this to the list. As much as I'm not a fan of Darkrai Giratina, as much as I know all of y'all are tired of seeing Darkrai Giratina, hopefully next set gets rid of Darkrai Giratina. It's still a very good deck in terms of climbing. It's one of the most consistent decks in the game, but it falls under the same, I guess, idea as Charizard. And let me get to it. There's two options. You either... one, respect the bird, or two, ignore the bird. If you ignore the bird, you probably have a more consistent, more adequate deck to beat more options or have a better matchup against most of the meta. Like you will never be stuck with the koala just being there as a random, like a free point for people. And that would be a list like this one. And this list is very consistent. It's very strong, very similar to what Darkrai Giratina has been for almost 2 months now. But if you do respect the bird and you want to have an answer, not just auto lose and full, like auto concede, as like the bird is hoping you do, you would play something more aligned with this, where it's essentially the same list. You just find room for the koala, as the koala is it's like the answer to Oricorio. It one-shots Oricorio. If they happen to put a cape on the bird, you would use Guzma, if not just ping damage with the Darkrai as usual. It's pretty straightforward. It's the exact same idea, same concept, same list. Like you're trying to do everything the same. just you have an answer for the bird. That's essentially what it comes down to. Either one is very consistent. It'll be very strong. Just know a lot of the meta is trying to take you down, from like Rampardos to Decidueye. Meowscarada is definitely hoping to find you in ladder, as well as an Oricorio. If you kind of like break or don't see the koala in time, they could build up certain like attacks to knock you out, especially like the versions with Greninja and Giratina as their own options to attack, which is again why I lean towards that. If I had to pick one deck, the title of that video that I made, I think a week ago now, is not a lie. Greninja or Oricorio with Giratina is my #1 choice for ranked. I have to stress that because this is a list, so you have multiple options. But again, that has been my #1. And my #2 would fall to like Magnezone or Oricorio, or maybe one of the Tapu Lele builds. And that would make up like the top 5 strategies that I recommend. However, for a bonus option, I have to go with my bread and butter, my pet deck, Arceus Carnivine. This has probably been my most played deck all season. So if I had to make a top 3, it would definitely be on it. Whether it's 1, 2, or 3, I'm not too sure. Because I lost track of, like, I've played way too many games this season. I'm gonna be completely honest with y'all. But again, it's hard for me to recommend this list as much as I did early on, because it is rough when you lead Arceus. Like, the same way it's won me as a 12-game win streak this season with this deck. I've had where it feels like 5 or 6 games lost in a row. Like, you start leading Arceus, or it gets rough, right? Like, you could brick. It's very prone to losing to itself, which feels very frustrating, especially when you're trying to grind and win games as much as possible. Very high ceiling. Very risky. Like, it's very risky, but it's one of my favorite decks, so I have to put it here. If you want to see gameplay on it, I've made a video on that as well. I'll be in the link down below or anything, but I couldn't go without mentioning it. But I had to put it as a bonus because I feel like it would be like misleading to say like, oh yeah, you have to try this deck, because like as the season went on, when I first made the video on this list, 12-game win streak, huge. Now it's like, I think it's evened out is the best way to put it. But hopefully y'all took away some list that works for y'all in this video. So if there's any like questions you have on any of the lists in this video, whether it's this one or on any, again, there's chapters all down below. Feel free to timestamp or like at like the time, like, oh, what would you do this? What good matchups? What would you recommend? What if I want to do this change? Feel free to comment all of those down below. I'll be active. Like, as soon as I see those comments, I reply. Once again, please consider subscribing. We're so close to 500. I promise y'all, next season's gonna go crazy. Regardless, thanks for watching. If you got to this point of the video, y'all the best, and above all else, stay pro.